Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the Imperium's top 10 worst jobs in Warhammer 40K. Luton 09. Cheers. You alright? In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. When people forget their duty, they are no longer human. They become something less than beasts. They have no place in the bosom of humanity, nor in the heart of the Emperor. Let them die and be quickly forgotten. Holy Synod of the Adeptus Ministorum, I think.
When we look at the lives of those serving the Imperium, we must also understand that it is assumed that all of their service is at the behest and honor of serving the Emperor of Man.
Look how awesome this artwork is. It's like a Renaissance painting. The effort and the artistry in a lot of Warhammer art is just amazing. It's super impressive. It's really detailed.
And the Imperium itself. Now, while the official line from the Administratum would be that to give yourself in whatever means are required for the betterment of the Imperium is a noble cause, just and above all else a required task, it's worth remembering that these people are still humans serving in the Imperium.
Look at that! It's sort of like Abe's Odyssey times 10,000.
Not superhuman Astartes or fanatical religious zealots, not cultish machine worshippers or drug-crazed Hive gang members, just your average person trying to stay alive and do the best that they can. Now, while undoubtedly citizens of the Imperium know that they give to a greater cause and are indoctrinated from birth into the Imperial truth, at the same time you can't escape the harsh realities of some of the worst jobs imaginable for those poor saps who end up designated with such a plight in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. Also, I think a short disclaimer is in order. By our standards, most jobs in the Imperium are often not really what you would quantify as jobs. You might simply be compelled by your seniors toward a role that then becomes your lot in life. There's really no true unified or standardized currency system within the Imperium itself either. To do so would be challenging, if not impossible, given the distant scale and general instability of the Imperium as a whole. While Hive Cities, for example, may use credits within them, or other planets operate on a more basic bartering system, some even using coinage, there's also the Throne Gelt, which is likely as close to being a universal payment as exists, and this is often used by, say, rogue traders and inquisitors who are traveling between systems.
Look at the artwork for the Hive City. In Warhammer 40K, humans basically span about like 1 million planets. These Hive Cities have an absurd number of people. The population of a standard Hive world in Warhammer 40K ranges between 100 billion and 500 billion people. It's terrible. Our planet is like less. Billions of people should not be living in one city. Wow, that sucks. But something very kind of unique that humans are able to do in Warhammer 40K is actually use the weight of numbers. That's not really a thing I see most human races do in all these like worlds or games or whatever with 1 million races. There's always like the Zerg or something who massively outnumber you, say in StarCraft. But the fact that the humans can actually Zerg rush you, that's quite interesting. That's quite unique.
Overall though, there's no unified economic system. It's all based on tithes and requirements for the Imperium's needs. It's all fairly inconsistent. While some jobs are paid and unpaid, it's often unlikely that you're going to have a literal choice in what your assigned lot in life is. People aren't going to be going out to school and then choosing a vocation, although obviously for some jobs, some roles, some level of moderate education is required so that you can best interact with the materials and data slates that you're having to handle. But you as an individual are an unimportant speck in the grand scheme of the Imperium, and you will do what is required of you, because that is your reality. Moreover, most of the Imperium trades in commodities. This can be raw materials, military hardware, and very often humans. So more than likely you are an asset and will be utilized however the Imperium sees it. The best way to visualize currency in the Imperium is that it's all system specific for the most part, and within a hive, for one, you are likely never going to leave, and so its credit system would be very specific to that location. There's no need for it to exist outside of that.
This is such a feat of imagination. It almost feels like a real place. And I think it's why Warhammer 40K is so endlessly fascinating to people. It's just so huge. huge. I can't really think of anything that's kind of bigger or deeper than this. The Imperium is only one race in the 40K galaxy, but the Imperium alone is like this endless rabbit hole of knowledge and lore and just all this interesting stuff. And then outside of that, you got like the Eldar, the Tyrannids, the Orks, the Necrons. I think that Warhammer 40K is kind of like the end point for many nerds' journeys because there's nothing else quite like it. Another great thing about 40K is it comes from that time period when you were allowed to be as cool as possible. We all know how modern things are. Warhammer 40K doesn't give a fuck. This was born out of like the 80s, I think. They just went as hard as fucking possible in all the ways that you're not allowed to do today. And that's why we love it. Like when I was playing Total War, as I would go to bed, I would just get on my phone, I would just look up all the units I was using. I was like, what are these fucking things? These beastmen, these lizardmen, why are they like this? What do they do? And the more I learn, I'm like, this is endlessly interesting.
Think of it like company money. You get paid by the person you're working for, who then also happens to simultaneously produce all of your other requirements. So you then are being paid by and paying back into that same company. It's a good way to basically regulate what the citizenry are using and ensure that everybody gets their fair or perhaps basic requirement share of things.
The funny thing is, he actually did make part 2 of this. The Imperium alone is so deep that one video of the top 10 worst jobs is not enough.
Servitors. Now, for reasons we won't get into here,
this, I think, is absolutely the worst job, period. I think we just started with the worst one right off the bat.
Within the Imperium, any advanced state of artificial intelligence is aggressively outlawed.
I think the reason AI is outlawed in the Imperium is because I think it just gets taken over by chaos immediately, or they had like an AI war a long time ago, and they don't even quite know the full details of it because it was that bad. But I think AI in the Imperium going rogue basically fucked them up so badly that humanity nearly went extinct. It was like one of the most insane wars in human history. The result is that the Imperium's like, that's it, no more AI, don't even think about it. So they come up with a horrific solution, and it is the Servitors.
So instead, the ever-ingenious humanity of the future has found a fantastic solution to get around this problem, because we are, after all, always such great problem solvers. The solution? Well, as is always the case, there is a plentiful supply of human plebs, criminals, and general undesirables. So how about we part lobotomize them, hopefully they get the gift of being mind-wiped, and then fuse what's left of their still living but now eviscerated carcasses into a somewhat functional cyborg. It's not really AI, and it's not really human. Problem solved, everybody's happy.
No! This is horrible! This is a horrible solution! I know Red 13 and FF7 Rebirth said, ha! Everyone's a winner!
Everyone's a winner!
But not in this case!
Except likely the unwilling participants of becoming a servitor. Servitors are a vital part of the Imperium, carrying out tasks too dangerous or too enduring for humans to want to take on the role. Although if no servitor were available and push comes to shove, you know that somebody's going to have to install that hyper-dangerous fuel system, and it's not going to be any officer types. While servitors are questionably necessary, they are a sad and incredibly depressing portrait of the dark future. And it's very questionable, given the fairly immoral state of humanity in the 41st millennium, just how well lobotomized these individuals are if they're not mind-wiped.
Basically, they're Robocops.
Servitors, while carrying out their instructed functions if left to their own devices, have been seen to become confused and disorientated, sometimes found in a lost corner of a starship or missing in the maze of a hive city, babbling to themselves with a sea of incomprehensible speech, with perhaps some scant details of their former selves and former lives.
So I forgot to mention, sometimes they're not always lobotomized correctly or completely. They are somewhat aware that they have lost a huge part of themselves, but they don't know how to reclaim it. And so they just sit there, just repeating whatever remnants of their memories are still there. Humanity's not looking too good, mate.
Perhaps trying to formulate some cognition or sense of who they were before. Worse still, we hear stories of people who undergo surgery appearing to be under anesthetic, but are in fact just paralyzed and fully conscious. So it broaches the possibility that some or even many servitors are actually fully aware of the lives they are living, and with full awareness and memory of even their former lives.
Oh, come on, it's horrible! Who thought of this? But the nice thing is that at least this isn't real. You think your life's bad? Just have a look at 40K for like 1 second and you'll be like, oh wow, I'm glad it's not that!
But who then simply lack the ability to speak or even control their own bodies, trapped in a silent, monotonous and potentially unending agony in the prisons they have been physically melded into. One of probably the most common and unpleasant tasks to partake in within the Imperium would be working in its vast factories. Now, planets with hive cities will usually be spattered with important resources, and their factories will then churn out any number of processed materials necessary for the functioning of their hive and or required by order of the Imperium off-world. The administrators and governors will not care how these orders are fulfilled, only that they are completed on time as required. This subsequently means the conditions for workers are just about as awful as you could imagine. Toxic, acrid air, long 20-hour shifts, token pay. Most people at this level of society, it's probably the best they could hope for. Upward mobility is not a thing, and the only other options being to slip into vagrancy and an underhive of horrors. Even then, this is a class of citizen who no one will blink an eye if somebody goes missing for whatever horrible reason, and still
What's even the point? At this point with humanity, what are we even defending? Just put us out of our misery. This is just dreadful.
And still grinding day after day in a factory of hot, dangerous, and likely condemning you to a slow, agonizing death as your body is ravaged by fulfilling your work quota, coupled with the slow poisoning it receives every day, is hardly an appealing alternative, but it's the best that many can hope for. An Imperial Guardsman. Now, while a Guardsman is obviously an honourable and respected role for those in the Imperium, because frankly anybody forced to face down a 40-foot high lumbering alien killing machine who will in all likelihood either cleave you in two, strip the skin from your body leaving you running around screaming like a skinned animal, or just bludgeon you to a pulp, or maybe bombard you with projectiles full of acidic boring maggots, deserves a reasonable level of respect, even if that service was in fact non-consensual.
What's better, Servitor or this? I still feel like this is somewhat better than Servitor. As terrible as this one is, at least you're out in the open and you got control of your own body. Whereas the idea of being a Servitor who's fully aware of your previous life because you weren't lobotomized properly and you're just walking around like doing stuff and you can't control anything, I think that's worse. I think you would wish for this so you could at least die. You know what? Fuck being a Servitor, I choose this. It's gonna suck ass, but at least it might suck a lot quicker and a lot less. And you know, you might get some cool action. You might pop off a Tyrannid, you know, you might headshot an Orc. You can do a 360 no-scope.
As with many military roles in the Imperium, Guardsmen serve with a duality of horrific warfare experience coupled with unceasing immortal honour. Because of the extreme casualty rates, most Guardsmen are equipped with simply a Lasgun, because why give them more than that when they're not going to be around to use it?
Apparently the Lasgun is actually stronger than you might think. The problem is Astartes and Space Marines are just so much stronger. It's like a 50 caliber rifle. But yeah, there are some books that say Lasguns are really strong and there's others that don't.
A Lasgun being a weapon often referred to as a flashlight because of its extremely poor effectiveness against the severe threats faced by the Imperium.
Okay, well then I stand corrected on this. No, Lasguns are jokingly referred to as flashlights. I think Lasguns are actually stronger than we're giving them credit for. But the problem is you are fighting against the strongest alien races that have ever been conceived. So it would probably like vaporize me, but it probably won't do a lot against a giant alien T-Rex that's so big that can eat a tank.
Other heavy weaponry for its soldiers are available, as well as some devastatingly powerful tanks, ordnance and air support, but for your average man on the ground, bad luck, you get the Lasgun. While Imperial propaganda will tell the glory of serving in the Imperium, the reality is fairly disconnected from this stirring and glorifying rhetoric. The phrase battle of attrition comes quickly to mind for many guardsmen who will not receive much if any personal body armor, unlike their superhuman Astartes saviors. Nope, you're going into battle with the shirt on your back, and as an individual, no one is going to be stopping to help you when you lose a limb or worse.
You know, it'd be great to be a Space Marine, but you have to survive the process of becoming one. And I may be incorrect on some of the lore here, but I think they have to get cut open with no anesthetic and have something like 19 artificial organs inserted into their body. Extra hearts, extra lungs. I think they have a thing in their tooth that like sprays acid if they want to, so they can spit acid if they're like imprisoned and need to melt through bars and stuff. Oh, and you'll also, I think, gain about like 1 or 2 feet in height. light. You'll live for like hundreds of years as well.
And the word expendable will be very much on your commander's lips. Now, if it isn't bad enough that you're facing a nightmarish host of Xenos, your commissar will be standing right behind you, ready to kill you or your newfound friends on the slightest hint of your hesitation, or perhaps simply to just motivate those around you. Unless you have qualified for a specialist division or an elite force within the Guard, you're more than likely going to become Operation Human Shield. And if by some miracle you manage to survive the horrific conditions of battling alien horrors with little more than a gun that shoots light, having watched many around you die in the most unbearable of circumstances, and then still have your sanity intact, not to mention hopefully not having your body be completely broken, there's nothing to say that an orbiting Astartes or Inquisition may not simply decide that things are not going quite as well as they'd expected, and decide that in fact an orbital bombardment might best serve the fast resolution of the situation, and your service is appreciated, Guardsman. If you feel like you're having a bad day and want to voice your concerns to those around you, this is not advisable. Commissars will be standing by to silence you for potentially damaging unit morale, but like so many aspects of the Imperium, the most hollow element is the fact that in serving your family, your planet, and your Imperium, you will not be remembered, and will be 100% left behind if the situation warrants it.
You are so expendable. The Imperium spans 1 million planets, and these hive worlds can hold 100 to 500 billion people. You're not important. Morpheus gives you meaning to the word cannon fodder. I mean, you're not wrong about that.
You will not be receiving a flashy service, or your family informed of your demise. You are but one of millions upon millions of soldiers, and while some planets are focused around specialist skills and military training, many more are unwitting or even unwillingly drafted. You will not receive special genetic engineering.
What are you supposed to do against this? You got a shitty little laser gun, and you're fighting this. A giant xenomorph T-Rex tarantula the size of a skyscraper. Nuke it? You know what? Just fucking nuke it. Take me out. This sucks.
You get your gun, your orders, and a direction to advance. Now get on with it, Guardsman, before your own officer shoots you for failure to follow command. Next in direct, you are the grease and oil in the machine as an administrative scribe. While many lives in the Imperium are pain-ridden and lives of frustrating physical agony, there is an argument to be made that endless perpetual administration is equally unbearable.
This is sort of an old joke that like bureaucracy is actually like a different form of hell. And I don't know if you guys ever read the books Discworld by Terry Pratchett. It's sort of like, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is like sort of comedic science fiction books by Douglas Adams. Discworld took that approach but to fantasy instead. And there was one book where the joke was that hell is real. Hell exists, except hell got taken over by a bureaucrat. So instead of all these tortures, like, you know, Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill and all that, all got overtaken by just endless paperwork and bureaucracy. And all the demons and all the people in hell were all suffering because they were so unbelievably bored. For example, before Sisyphus is even allowed to push the boulder up the hill, he has to read something like 300 books of all the different protocols and safety regulations for how to safely push a boulder. And he's just like, I miss the days when I used to be able to push the boulder. And I know it always rolled back down, but you know, sometimes you try different grips. So you try using different muscles. What if I use my shoulders? What if I put more of my thighs into it? But this is horrible. I can't even push it. I thought that was a very funny idea, that actual physical suffering could be overtaken by something even worse. True boredom that comes from endless paperwork, rules, regulations, and so on and so forth.
The role of an administrator or an administrative scribe is to perpetually carry out tasks that must seem simply entirely pointless in the grand scheme of things. Your daily tasks lost amid a vast ocean of information. Your whole being lost in reams and reams of paper trails, and even the purpose and intent of your tasks are potentially lost to meaning, or possibly
What is even going on with this? Has this guy been modified so his mouth is a receipt printer or something? What is even going on here?
or possibly even no longer required, having been long forgotten about. Billions of clerks, scribes, and general admin staff work tirelessly to manage the Imperium at every tier. Compared to others, this may seem like a sweet job to land yourself, but imagine having to do the same thing every day, without end, without opportunity, and without meaning. In many respects, it's the closest thing to hell for many. pointless tasks.
That's amazing. In a way, you could spend your entire life just printing out all these things, reading all this paperwork, signing all these documents, just filing all this stuff, and it actually doesn't matter at all. Like, your job has actually become obsolete, and they just forgot to tell you. You can tell an English person wrote this.
Meaning. In many respects, it's the closest thing to hell for many. Pointless tasks with no thanks or appreciation, no sense of really contributing anything to the greater whole, cold, harsh working conditions, still subject to the same brutal rules and regulations that dictate all Imperial life. Indeed, the very nature of the complex bureaucracy that is strictly enforced allows little room for error. Regulations, forms, protocols, and process is your life. Worse perhaps is to live a life of blind ignorance of the goings-on beyond the walls and confines of your endless daily data processing. Many administrative positions are considered hereditary as well, so you'll be committed to a life of permanent placement facing logic engines and cogitator workstations. For an Administratum scribe working in their specific sub-departments, all must be recorded, catalogued, completed in quadruplet, processed, and then as long as centuries later, finally archived. The whole process is grindingly slow and dull beyond the strongest possible interpretation of the word.
Just give me Imperial Guardsman. Give me a Lasgun. At least let me fucking die before I have to spend like decades just doing meaningless paperwork. At least I'll be able to see the world for a bit.
And as a final insult, you must fulfill your role accurately and efficiently for the entirety of your servitude.
You can't even just half-ass it. You have to do it heaps well.
Failure to do so risks intervention by the Inquisition. Administrative departments who have failed to maintain an acceptable level of efficiency, or worse, make a catalogue of errors, may be subject to mass summary executions by Inquisitors for crimes against the Imperium. As a simple cog in a machine, you could also unknowingly participate in a scheme of upward conspiracy and corruption and be judged for this without even having been aware of doing so.
You don't even know if you're just like randomly being used by someone else's harebrained scheme and you just all get executed.
A thankless, soul-destroying job where you'll likely never see anything beyond the incarcerated walls of your administrative vault sector. Now, the human batteries, otherwise known as Psykers, used to fuel the Emperor atop of his golden throne. Unsanctioned Psykers are continually hunted by the Imperium, and when discovered they will likely be transported off-world to return to Terra in what are referred to as the much-feared black ships.
This also might be one of the worst ones, because I think you're just a human sacrifice. In order for the God Emperor of mankind to survive, you have to sacrifice a lot of human psychics to him every single day. Traditionally, 1,000 human psychics are sacrificed every single day to sustain the God Emperor and power the Golden Throne. However, due to the decaying machinery and the Emperor's increasing hunger, recent lore indicates that the number has escalated to 4,000 human psychics every day. These unfortunate individuals act as living psychic batteries. Their souls are forcefully drained to power the Emperor's life support systems, keeping the Astronomicon beacon lit for interstellar travel and to hold shut a shattered webway portal to prevent demons from flooding into Terra. The Imperium continually gathers these psychers across the galaxy using massive fleets of vessels known as the Black Ships. So yeah, you might think it'd be pretty cool to be born with psychic powers, but not in the Warhammer 40K universe. No, you were just one of 4,000 people who happen to be sacrificed this day to keep the God Emperor of mankind alive. And you know what? You kind of have to do that, because if the God Emperor of mankind dies, then the warp opens up and chaos demons flood into the world and kill all humans forever. But to be fair, considering the state of humanity right now, maybe that's not the worst thing. I don't really know which humans are doing well. Maybe if you're like a rich nobleman and you just happen to be living on like a paradise planet that's all yours, I'll take that job. I think 99% of humanity is not doing well. 5-0, if you're weak, you get eaten by the Emperor, and if you're strong enough, you get to be human artillery. If you're really strong, you can be a living interstellar radio. All of those sound awful. If the Emperor dies, he'll reincarnate with a different personality. That's true, Rainmorga, but the question is, can humanity survive long enough for him to get reborn and grow up again?
As an unsanctioned Psyker, you'll be assigned to one of two roles for the Imperium: training to a full operating Psyker or a psychic human battery to fuel the Emperor and the Astronomicon's daily required injection of psychic power. Unsanctioned Psykers represent a great threat to populations as they run the risk of unwittingly becoming a portal for demonic incursion, and those imprisoned within its cavernous, permanently dark, freezing cold holds on the journey back to Terra, with thousands of other unfortunate members being probably the most harrowing part of the ordeal, as these untrained Psykers will expel their panicked and fraught emotions all around them. As such, only the most mentally strong Sisters of Silence will crew these vessels so as to be able to withstand the constantly soul-numbing despair of the incarcerated amateur Psykers. For the majority of these poor souls, upon reaching Terra itself, their fate will be psychic disintegration as they're consumed by the Emperor and the Astronomicon, their very mind, soul and body being consumed in agonizing psychic fire, and their bodies and brains are burned to ashes. But it does keep the Imperium's lighthouse lit for another day at least.
Oh, what's even the fucking point? Well, at the end of the day, look, we're humans, all right? You know, this is the home team. It's not a great team in this world, but it's our team. We've got to stand up for it. Just to top it off, you don't even die like instantly or painlessly. You just die in extreme pain.
Lighthouse lit for another day at least. An unpleasant but perhaps at least highly appreciated task to carry out in your service for the Imperium is that of refueling a Starship warp drive.
This is also a really bad job, but look how cool this starship is, man. It's like a giant cruiser. I've seen some cruise ships that look like basically a skyscraper building if it was just on its side. This is like 1,000 times bigger than that. How is this even supposed to land on a planet? Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't need to. It's just there in space.
And this has scant documentation on who specifically carries out this role, but it is described as being similar to a funeral procession. Those chosen to carry out the task will begin by leaving an airlock to cross the service deck of a ship, wearing robes of grey metallic thread connected up with valves of long cabling, all wearing thick lead gloves as they carry their heavy metal caskets upon their shoulders. The service staff's eyes, nose and mouth will be similarly fitted with these connective valves, the unknown material they carry within these caskets evidently being extremely hazardous, for as these individuals cross to their objective, their flesh, skin will slowly cook and be burned away. This process being described by tech priests as the most perilous operation a vessel could undertake, barring actual combat. As the procession of staff would approach the warp drive central column, the casket carriers would become even further physically damaged and even start to disintegrate, but being driven perhaps by the chemicals and gases being infused into them as pain suppressors and some chemical concoctions to enable them to carry out such a task, they lumber forward.
At least you have pain suppressors. Like, hold the line. Everything we've looked at so far has been extremely painful. At least these guys are so high on toxic chemicals, they don't feel pain anymore. This might not be the worst one to pick.
But the closer the carriers come to the drive itself, the more they begin to stagger and their metallic robes deteriorate. Their infused chemicals keeping them barely standing as their bodies begin to quite literally fall apart, chunks of flesh and matter falling from their person as they push on to deliver their fuel to the drive. The casket would be finally pushed into a socket of the drive column as some of the carrier's limbs would detach and strips of muscle and bone hang down from their gaping robes. Servitor-like machines would collect the remains of the carriers and scrape these into yet more caskets before tech priests offer prayers to the machine god.
Okay, this is really bad. At least it doesn't hurt.
With the last great effort, the final casket bearers would load their fuel into the drive before the doors would rapidly shut. The robed shells would now be retracted to the entry point, and the ship's captain might be heard to utter, "Emperor, preserve us."
This looks so brutal, man. This looks so interesting. It kind of looks like something real. Except, like, as our tech advances, it wouldn't look like this. It's sort of like very high tech, but also very low tech at the same time.
Before finally turning away from the harrowing scene playing out on the engineering deck of their starship. Imagine life in something like the 13th century, essentially the Middle Ages.
Because the Imperium spans 1,000,000 planets, this doesn't mean that everything is on the same tech level. There are actually planets in 40K where you live like a Monty Python and the Holy Grail peasant. The tech just hasn't reached you yet, or the Imperium's forgotten that you exist, or something like that. This is also really fucked, man. It would be bad enough existing in, say, the 1300s where there's the Black Plague, but at least all the tech was somewhat equal. Imagine being one of those peasants and then, like, Tyrannids invade you. You can't do anything!
This is life on a feudal world. There are a few citizens with specific jobs working stone and metals, but your average person's life is doomed to endless hard labour. This physically destroying job is carried out from dawn to dusk, year round, with the populace likely surviving on a meagre supply of its own productivity. a high mortality rate of disease and infection, industrial accidents with primitive machinery or domestic complications like no medicine to prevent women from dying in childbirth. This all in and of itself sounds hard enough of a life, but imagine, if you will, the job of a feudal gong farmer. Now what is this scintillating job? Well, it's collecting the mess of medieval latrines and cesspits, bringing it manually outside of a city or a town to be used as fertilizer for farming. You do get the privilege of searching through the waste if you choose to find any valuables, and by the way, you also have to work only during the night. And here's hoping you don't pass out from the fumes you're inhaling and potentially drown in the stuff you're having to rake out every night. And for those on a feudal world, to top it off, an Imperial Administrator will be watching from an orbital platform, and that's about all the defenses your planet has, so let's hope no blood-crazed orcs, hungry Tyrannids, or immoral demons come wandering by.
Yeah, so you're just some, like, Monty Python peasant, and then space orcs can just invade you. As Jotaro would say, yari yari des.
If you thought working a feudal planet or in a factory from material processing in a hive was bad, don't be so ungrateful, citizen. You have a privileged life compared to those poor souls working in agri-processing. While this is going to vary from hive planet to planet, some of the worst of this is processing what's referred to as corpsestarch and ration biscuits, both unpleasant in their own way.
Just look at this! Look at this artwork, man! It would be horrible to live here, but it's amazing that someone thought of this and just painted the whole thing.
As populations for the massive arcologies known as Hive Cities become quite simply ridiculous, housing anything between 10 and 100 billion citizens, the need for sustenance is obviously difficult to provide for. And while you may be lucky enough to save up your credits and purchase a delicious chunk of rat meat, you're more than likely going to be enjoying some delicious ration bars or corpsestarch. But how do workers produce such luxuries? Well, ration bars are best described as horribly greasy, generally unpopular, shockingly, and are biscuit bars to feed workers, serfs, and military forces. They're manufactured by harvesting bio-rich matter from ocean planets and worlds with seas, which then provides a protein-rich gruel. This, though, would be not enough to provide for the billions of citizens, so it must be instead fed to larvae of the Orochian bilefly. Now, when these larvae reach an optimal stage in their life cycle, when they're plump enough, the larvae are going to be pulped by workers and compressed down into the hard-to-stomach biscuit ration bars. The agri-workers doing this process will work in huge air-sealed pens that produce these plump fat larvae. If you're working in one of these places, then things are not going to be going well for you, and you're probably quite low down in your hive city, as the stench and endless droning vibrations and material mechanical sounds of the bileflies is not one that many would choose to live with. Still though, it could be worse. You could be producing corpsestarch, which is about as appealing as it sounds. This material is bland, filling, and relatively nutritious because it's basically reconstituted biomatter mixed with animals, plants, discarded organics, and of course rumoured to include human corpses as well. While this is undoubtedly
This just sounds horrible. British cuisine in 40k. At least Soylent Green has a nice ring to it. Who called it corpsestarch? This is horrible marketing. This is a terrible label for this food. It's not appetizing at all, mate. But anyway, chat, don't you worry. It's Warhammer 40k after all. It gets even worse than that.
While this is undoubtedly frowned upon by various administrative departments of the Imperium, it's one of those things that a planetary governor is going to either sweep under the rug, play down, or full-on cover up. It's never out and out a disclosed ingredient, but highly suspected that one way the population are able to be adequately fed is the mechanical reclamation of human biomatter, albeit then diluted by various other organic materials.
They're 100% doing this. I mean, look at everything else they do. To not do this would be simply inefficient. Anyway, that's just my theory, which is a fact.
It's like so many things in the Imperium, on the borderline of being acceptable. And when faced with limited options for feeding your population, the alternative being violent food riots, then it becomes a necessary evil. Pity though the workers who have to work in the stinking immoral environment where you must process endless stinking vats of biomatter, perhaps seeing some things that are going to be difficult to forget as you catch your eager 4 hours of rest before getting back into the production line.
What even is this image? What am I looking at? Is this what happens to you while you're here? Or is this just how it feels to live in the Imperium? Because this place sucks.
Now, I am yet to cover the assassins of the Imperium, but one aspect in being selected to work as an Imperial assassin is their pre-training.
To be fair, you look pretty cool. Got a bit of a spunky hairstyle over here. This might not be too bad. Let's see how this job is.
As with most Imperial roles, it's quite unpleasant. But specifically, the role of the Eversor Temple, which disturbingly leans towards using the youngest recruits as they are less developed and therefore easier to bioadapt later in surgery. To start off with, most recruits will be orphans from a death world, of which there are quite unsurprisingly a plentiful supply in the Imperium. These recruits, after some base training, will be transported to Terra, but en route they will continue to be trained by a survival of the fittest assessment. These very young recruits will engage in what can best be described as an ongoing battle royale of wills, initiative and resolve. Recruits are required to survive on minimal food, even minimal oxygen, for days on end, as well as continual forced fighting between themselves. This could be armed, unarmed, in near total darkness, or distracting aural and lighting conditions. Heat, cold, varying levels of gravity from the thin to the severe all will be factors in their assessment. When they eventually reach Terra, there could be anything below 1/10 of the original number of recruits who have survived this harrowing ordeal, or perhaps not at all if their assessors deem them unsatisfactory to requirements.
Or perhaps not at all. Just kill them all.
Recruits, though, will then be organised by the temple they are best suited for. Eversor Assassin recruits face, though, the further horror of being now forcibly bioengineered. These youngest recruits, who are essentially children, will be turned through this process into unstoppable drug-fueled killing machines. To achieve this, the Medicus adepts will use a range of genetic adaptation, endoskeletal restructuring, bionic implants, and infusions of chemicals to turn the previously human youth into a nightmarish weapon that can barely be controlled by its own leaders. Their cerebral cortex will also be enhanced and the brain fitted with Lobo chips. These will amplify the assassin's state of mind to either raging hate, pure determination, or extreme fanatical drive for the love of the Imperium at any cost. This whole process is unpleasant and far from risk-free. Many subjects will die of massive multi-organ collapse as their bodies struggle to handle the severe restructuring. And this is not to mention the inevitable side effects from being turned into a bio-enhanced, drug-fueled, borderline if not psychotic killing machine. Past this point, the assassin will continually attempt to balance the complex cocktail of chemicals that's fueling and simultaneously poisoning their system. Finally, at the end of all this, the assassin will be placed in cryosuspension, their bodies so drug-fueled and their own mindset so completely unstable that it's easier than keeping them actively conscious. Before a mission, they're going to be placed into a drop pod and then fired down to achieve their task. Becoming an Eversor Assassin is likely one of the worst jobs in the Imperium, as your life is nothing but soul-destroying pain and servitude to be stripped of everything you were and used as an indiscriminate weapon of the Imperium.
Okay, that is pretty bad. Would you rather be that or a servitor? They're both living hell. Just give me a Lasgun. Screw it. I'll be the Imperial Guard. I think the Guard is still the best job you can have out of all of this. Everything else sucks so badly. Yeah, Guard, you go to war with your boys, you know? It could be you and me hanging out, getting our faces ripped off by Tyrannids. But at least, you know, up until that point, it could be all right.
Now, penal legions are the dregs of Imperial society, so you can imagine these are some less than capable individuals. These are usually members of the Imperial Guard and PDF who have perhaps not been executed on the spot for their crimes and instead commuted to a life sentence in the loosest definition of the word. However, a penal legion can be easily made up of murderers, maniacs, thieves, in general criminal elements of society, or just those who were far too incompetent in their duties and have been sentenced to play some more mildly useful role for the Imperium. These legions, though, unfortunately, are basically the waste dump of human society and are forced to wear explosive slave collars that are more about turning the troops into human bombs than a disciplinary incentive. They march in a shambolic way towards their goal, or perhaps run if they're crazed, and then perhaps to just encourage those around them with whatever they're meant to be doing. Maybe a few of them will be blown up and detonated here and there. But is this the job we're talking about? Well, no. In fact, what we're actually sparing a thought toward are those tasked with maintaining control over these plebs. Penal Legion Overseers essentially have the unfortunate task of herding a bunch of shambolic, potentially murderous and psychopathic cats. Some of the Penal Legion will relish their role and accept their death, running headlong into the enemy, but others may fall into mental ruin, just falling to the floor, crying, unable to move. Others may try to run away, or simply just lash out and kill those standing around them. As frustratingly soul-destroying as such a task is, those commanding a Penal Legion are usually well versed in dealing out punishment, cruelty, and incentives to their force, and will lay down brutal levels of discipline. Despite this professionalism though, it's still likely one of the most frustrating roles to have to command in, with a force who are potentially just as happy killing each other and themselves as they are the enemy. To finish,
I actually think that might be one of the better jobs. You're not one of the guys with the bomb collars. You're one of the guys trying to herd them. This would be very annoying though, because I feel like if you fuck up your job, which you will, because these guys are completely uncontrollable, the Imperium will probably punish you and turn you into a servitor, or put a bomb collar on you.
So now to finish, I'm going to have to break your immersion. But the truest worst job that could exist in 40k is, well, whatever you can draw from your own imagination. Because this might seem like a cop-out, but it's actually the real bedrock of 40k. Because while it has embedded canon and non-canon lore, it's also a world whereby you, as a participant, are encouraged to use your own imagination. The civilian life of the Dark Future is very poorly documented, and really we only have scraps of information compared to the endless raging warfest that is ongoing between various factions. The civilian life of the Imperium is perhaps one of the most interesting aspects that exists in the 40k universe, and if Games Workshop will not expand upon it, maybe it's time we start doing so ourselves with some wild speculations and imaginings. The whole thing with 40k is that the Imperium itself is so fractured and spread across countless systems with vast distances in between, it's really hard to focus in on some of the details of different worlds. Now this has happened very, very slowly over time with little fragments of information, but some could be, for example, nightmarish gulags, while others could be verdant, lush garden worlds of pleasure.
It's possible that there are some people in the Imperium who are just like planetary lords who just live out on some crazy mansion on some planet in the middle of nowhere that's a tropical paradise, and thankfully it's just gone under the radar. The Xenos aren't aware of it, the Imperium isn't aware of it either, and you can just kind of chill and pray that it stays that way. Some worlds have never seen war, yeah, but then again, there's also times the Imperium has checked in on a world that was recorded to be some lush tropical paradise, and they get there and it's just this huge desert wasteland, and they're like, what happened? The Tyrannids. Because the Tyrannids will just come and just eat everything, all biomatter, and just convert it into more Tyrannids. But ideally, let's assume the Tyrannids don't find you. This would be pretty cool. But it's all temporary. Oh yeah, and then the Empire swoops in and nukes your planet for suspected heresy. I mean, that could always happen as well. But I like what he's saying here, that it's up to the human imagination. You're not necessarily restricted to being an audience member when it comes to 40k. You can be a participant. There's no reason you can't be. If you can come up with interesting ideas and lore that sort of fleshes out its world, that authentically fits in with its world, it doesn't break the rules and it doesn't make it cringe or lame or whatever, it fits the vibe, why not? The best possible scenario is that you're like that space marine who discovered, I think, a lost codex that had the blueprint for like an improved combat knife. And his reward for finding that was that he was given his own planet, like this, and he could just retire and live there. Because the thing is, that doesn't sound like too much at first, but let's say the improved combat knife he's got is just like 10-20% better. It's just sharper, it's more durable, lighter, cheaper to produce. Now, multiply that across all the space marines of the entire Imperium. That's actually going to make a statistical difference. When you put it that way, yeah, give that guy his own planet. It was a Guardsman squad? Yeah, I don't know the details on that, but that's even better. You're a Guardsman and you found that? Bro, that is the best possible outcome.
Others could be more Earth-like with all the complex goings-on of human life that this entails, or you could be living in a horrific Hive City or toxic choking Forge world, or how about a planet that's being cut off from the Imperium due to a simple administrative error.
That can also happen. Sometimes the Imperium just like doesn't log your planet correctly and they just forget you exist. In a way that's good, but I just hope the Xenos don't find us.
Forced to go its own way with the vague hope of one day being rediscovered if it's not destroyed by some other alien process in the meanwhile. And this for me is one of the most enjoyable parts of Warhammer 40,000. You can use your own imagination to build a whole narrative given the existing lore and framework of the factions within it. Often the world of 40k draws on real-world history, and it's something that I really love the idea of doing and creating whole descriptions of planets and locations that are non-canon and entirely fictional. Perhaps this is something I'll find time to do, perhaps it's something you guys would be interested in me doing. In the meanwhile, worst jobs canon or not, tell me down below what's the worst thing you can come up with. I'm probably going to regret asking that, but let's see. As always guys, thanks for watching and thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next one.
Each man executed is a man who can no longer serve. To fail in service to the Emperor is the greatest of sins. Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves.
Absolutely brilliant content. Luton09, make sure you are subscribed to his channel, and if you are interested in Warhammer 40k stuff, this guy is one of the best in the world. I think is one of the best channels on YouTube. Like his narrating voice, his use of language, his use of imagery, and his use of like ambience and music, it makes it feel like he's talking about real history. Immensely immersive, really entertaining, fascinating, gripping stuff. As I say, Warhammer 40k is a feat of human imagination. Like, it's amazing that people thought of all of this, and we are also extremely lucky that it's not real, because if it was, we are fucked. Let's have a look at some of these worst jobs that the viewers came up with. Out of all these things, being a shit collector sounds downright relaxing and carefree in comparison. Well, I mean, if you invent some sort of device that protects your sense of smell, it's not as bad as some of the other ones, man. You can apply for retirement as a guardsman after 20 years of service, when the average time that a soldier fights before death is 15 hours. Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a loophole here, now that you mention it that way. And I do love how in the comments sections of Warhammer 40k videos, there's always people sort of role-playing.
You're speaking a lot of heresy for someone within purging distance.
Starship Refueler looks like a wonderful job. Well, I mean, like, you got painkillers, man. Like, none of these other jobs have painkillers. You're gonna die, but you're gonna die horribly in all of these. At least you're not in pain, and it doesn't last long. Bro, I'm so high watching all these videos, and I don't even know what 40k is, but its lore is wild. Being a servitor sounds horrifying on the level of I have no mouth and I must scream. Yeah, it's really bad. People manually carry fuel to the thrusters of a starship. They get disintegrated along the way. Why can't you just make a tube that sends the fuel down?
Sounds like someone is committing heresy. You dare question the means of the Imperium?
Okay, so this is what I was talking about before, guys. You know, the Lasgun meme makes sense in some context, but fans undersell how lethal a Lasgun really is. A Lasgun is still extremely superior to anything we have in terms of guns, like on Earth right now, you and me. They blow a fist-sized hole right through people instantaneously from immense range. If a foe doesn't die from a vital hit, most normal creatures perish from what is called thermal shock. They have a huge array of different models for different tasks. All right, we got the humble las pistol that will kill you with a headshot. A lasgun can explode your limb and send it flying off your body. If you turn it all the way up, it can create explosions on contact that are devastating. A Gatling lasgun nest can clear a kill zone in seconds. Lasgun sniper rifles fire their round instantly, ignoring wind and other issues a sniper may otherwise experience. So, I mean, they're not too bad.
The legionnaire that scoffs at a lasgun has not charged across an open field against 100 of them. Mayor the Scarred, siege champion of the Scargivers, Black Crusade.
I love Warhammer 40k because there could be lost feudal planets where they're still using swords and bows and knights in chainmail, thinking psychic powers are magic. And then there's futuristic hive planets with gangsters and laser rifles and robotic limbs all in the same universe. It's amazing what they've come up with, man. As I say, the diversity of worlds that spam the Imperium is nuts. Orks live and die in happiness while the Imperium gets this. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my reaction and commentary of the Imperium's 10 worst jobs in Warhammer 40k by Luton09. Like, subscribe, and catch me live on Twitch. Anyway, get out of here. Video's over.